What's up, motherfuckers? I just recorded a video on the top 10 wrestlers of all time, right? Now, the problem with this is that I realized that in order to do that video, I'm going to have to actually put in some time to edit the little picture that you see. Because I would like it to be a slideshow type of thing where I say number 10 and then boom, wrestler, right? Now, the problem with that is while I was recording that, I didn't plan on doing that. So now I have to go back and listen to that video and take down notes as to when the next scene will be, if you will, right? So with that being said, you might have to wait a couple of days for that video when I have some time. And in that video, I read off all the new subscribers, so I won't bore you guys with that again, but just know that if you are a new subscriber, you have gotten your shout out, motherfuckers. Now, for the subscribers that I get from now until that video comes out, look towards the next video after that or some shit, motherfuckers. Today, we're going to talk about something very important, right? What's it called? The invasion angle, right? The controversial invasion angle. It just so happens that I was on YouTube and I saw a video. I Googled for it. I wrote like invasion angle, and there was a video that this jerk off had made. Now this guy, I don't remember his name, but he's like some Bill Gates looking nerd, right? And Jay Rance, I noticed randomly again, a day or two after I saw this video, that Jay Rance made a video against this guy, right? So maybe this guy is someone, I think he had a lot of views, but maybe it's someone that people know. Now I can probably, by going to Jay Rance's page here, I can probably figure out who this asshole is because he made a video. I can't see it here. That is weird. Okay. But anyways, he's some nerd, right? He's some nerd. He's like, his name is like Brian Zane. There it is. I found him. Brian Zane. Now, I don't know what Jay Rance is talking about because I've been very busy and I haven't seen that Jay Rance video. Now, doesn't matter what Jay Rance said. I mean, it says, fuck Brian Zane, so I'm assuming it's not good. But I will tell you this. This guy is the most annoying, not Jay Rance, but Brian Zane. This guy is the most annoying son bitch I've ever seen in my life. And the things that he was saying about, the invasion angle proves beyond a reasonable doubt, motherfucks, that people with a lot of views sometimes and a lot of subscribers have zero idea about wrestling, right? This guy understands nothing about wrestling. This Brian Zane, some bitch. This guy gets zero of it, right? I didn't write down the points he made because I wasn't looking to make a video about him. I was just inspired to make a video about the invasion angle, which I think is awesome, right? But this guy made the typical points. So some of the things that I'm going to address here as typical points, he made. Some of them I'm sure he didn't make, and I might attribute to him by accident. And if I do that, I apologize. But this guy just pissed me off because he did not understand what was happening. He is a mark. He is just like those fat beards who are like, well, if I had done it, it would have been like if I had done it irrespective of any other thing other than my fantasy booking, it would have been better. Yeah, no shit, motherfucks. And that's the problem with people like this guy. They think that the world is a vacuum where it's like unlimited money. Oh, why did we get Goldberg versus Stone Cold? 15,000 reasons, motherfucks, and I will get to some of them, all right? So now, let's talk about the invasion angle. As usual, I spent about 3.5 minutes with a little intro about what I'm going to talk about. I should probably stop doing that, right, cucks? Okay. Let's talk about the invasion angle. So, as many of you know, in like March or some shit of 2001, I think it was, Vincent Kennedy McMahon purchased WCW for pennies on the dollar, motherfucker. He paid like $4 million for all the contracts of some of those people, the library, and of course the intellectual property that came with WCW, right? And probably a lot of physical resources too. He probably got like a lot of t-shirts that they had in stock, a bunch of shit like that. But so you got a really good deal, right? More importantly, the thing that he got was the ability to win and leverage that into a lot of money and potentially even more money for himself, right? Forget the WCW library, but he had the ability to leverage the fact that he defeated them, right, into a lot of money. Now, let's get to it. I tune in to Monday Night Raw every Monday as a kid and watch from 8 to 9. I watch Monday Night Raw, motherfuckers. I mean, Monday Night Nitro. At 9 o'clock, I switch that sumbitch, right, on to WWE or WWF at the time, Raw. Then periodically I'll switch back during commercial breaks, things like that, right? Like it was a different time, motherfucks, Like, I mean, I guess you could have VHS'd it, but that really wasn't a thing anymore. People weren't recording things. They're just kind of watching them, right? So, I tuned in and I wasn't a nerd because I was a kid and I didn't know that Vince McMahon had purchased it, right? I had no idea, as a matter of fact, motherfucks. I didn't go on dirt sheets or whatever the fuck. Like the internet was really new. at that time. Like people like didn't really like trust a lot of websites. Oh, you might get a virus or whatever, right? So there you have it. I didn't know anything about it, right? I probably didn't even know that it existed. I didn't know that these dirt sheet things existed, right? And furthermore, why would anyone want to have this spoiled? So I was one of those people that when I turned on Monday Night Nitro as a kid, I was like, holy shit, it's Vince McMahon. What the fuck is happening? It must be some sort of collaboration. But aren't they bitter enemies? And then Vince is like, I bought this some bitch. I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm like, shit just got real, motherfucker. Vince bought it, right? I'm like, WCW is done. I was kind of happy because I like WWE more. But I watched WCW, and that's why it's important that you people listen to me and understand why Division Angle was awesome. Because a lot of these idiots, like Brian Zinn, probably didn't watch WCW back then, or at least doesn't remember it. Because if he had, he would know that like a lot of what he said is just objectively wrong. Now, Vince McMahon opens the show and pretty much declares that he bought the son bitch. Then later in the night, Shane McMahon comes out. You think he's going to come out on Raw, but he comes out on Nitro. They're obviously in two different cities. And he tells Vince McMahon that he is the McMahon that bought WCW, right, to continue the feud. Now, a lot of people were like, holy shit, does this mean that next week we're going to have Nitro again? Like, what the fuck? What does that mean, right? Maybe Nitro will be on, same format. No, of course not, right? They're not going to spend that money on a failing show. So, which even though that was their original plan. So then, WCW wrestlers keep invading, little by little, here and there, motherfucks. They keep invading Monday Night Raw, right? Like you had Mike Awesome came in, became the hardcore champion under the 24-hour rule, right? Then you had Buff Bagwell and Booker T have that quote-unquote horrible main event. Now, the main event itself was not horrible. I mean, it wasn't a great match, don't get me wrong. But it was horrible because fans started booing it, right? They're like Booker T and Buff Bagwell, I don't know why, but somehow they were presented as like faces, right? Because they were just like Shane was the face of the feud. The feud was primarily between Vince and Shane, right? And Shane was the face, Vince was the heel, like he usually is, right? They were going to have a match at WrestleMania, and to promote that, Shane was the guy that bought WCW. But it was more than that, right? There was obviously like a long-term idea here, right? But despite that, Shane being the face in the feud was the face in the larger feud, right? So WCW was kind of seen as these guys who just wanted an opportunity, right? So they came out and they had like a match, right? Kurt Angle and what's it called, Stone Cold, who were heels, came out and beat up Buff Bagwell and Booker T, right? And that was pretty much it. Like nobody gave a shit. Like it was clear that WWE was going to have to be the face because the fans are WWE fans, right? This is common sense. Obviously, WWE was going to be the good guys, and obviously they were going to win, right? The story, that is, right? They also won in real life, motherfuckers. So then, what happens is, the invasion angle starts. Like I said, here and there, a Mike Awesome would show up, and then a few ECW motherfuckers started showing up. Tommy Dreamer, Rob Van Dam, they started showing up, and eventually, this led to a bunch of WWF guys, like the APA, like Hardcore Holly, like that level of wrestler, getting their asses whooped by the WCW guys. A lot of people came into the ring to save them, but they were all ECW guys, so they turned, revealing the merge, motherfuckers, revealing the merge between ECW and WCW, also known as the Alliance, motherfuckers. And Shane McMahon reveals that the new owner of ECW is none other than his sister, Stephanie McMahon. Now, a lot of people, here's one part where a lot of people get pissed off at, right? Including this Brian Zane some bitch, right? He's like, well, why wasn't Paul Heyman the owner? Why the fuck would Paul Heyman be the owner? He's an announcer, right? Stephanie McMahon is the billion-dollar princess. She has money and resources to build the brand, right? So that's number one, why someone like her makes sense as the owner. The other obvious reason, right, is because it creates a storyline of Vince versus his children, right? And one critique that a lot of people have is that the invasion angle was more about Vince McMahon and the McMahons than it was about WCW. Yes, that's correct. That's correct, retards. The problem here is not that the focus was on the McMahons. The problem here was that you thought the focus would be on the WCW wrestlers. Have you lost your fucking mind? This is, Brian Zane said this too. This is exactly what I'm saying, right? This is exactly the point I'm trying to make. Like, if you go in there thinking that the central focus is Sean Stasiak, then yeah, you'd be disappointed. If you understand what the storyline is, which is Vince McMahon in real life has purchased WCW, and once again, WCW is a competitor to him, and now it's his children that are running it against him, right? This is the real storyline. The storyline isn't, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to Buff Bagwell. No one cares about what happens to Buff Bagwell, right? And we'll get to that in a second. So the real storyline here is, how is Vince, right, the head of WWE, handling the fact that there is an invasion, right? This makes perfect sense. If you have a business and people are trying to fuck with your business, they're trying to take over, let's say, or they're trying to like oust you, right? Who's the main character in that story? The business owner. It's not The Rock, right? But the invasion angle did a really good job at making some of the relevant wrestlers huge stars, right? And making them focal points. Now, let's get to that. The treatment of the stars. WCW, when they were bought by Vince McMahon, the structure of the company was such that the contracts of the big-time players, people like Goldberg, Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Rey Mysterio even, Scott Steiner, these motherfuckers, their contracts were not owned by WCW. They were owned by Time Warner. And Time Warner has to pay them, right? They have to pay them according to the terms of their contract. And their contracts pretty much say that we're going to pay you to wrestle for WCW. Now, WCW doesn't exist anymore. So they're like, all right, go fuck yourselves. Pay me, right? So people like Rey Mysterio, Goldberg, Hogan, and friends didn't have to wrestle, and they got paid anyways, right? The only option Vince had was the actual legal option of buying the contracts out, right? In other words, paying, like a lot of people don't understand this because they don't understand anything, paying Time Warner large amounts of money in order to take over the contracts that Time Warner holds of people like Goldberg and Hogan, etc., and having them work for WWE. Now, in that, there's a lot of legalese, but let's not even get to it. In that, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. Number one, why the fuck would Vince McMahon do that, right? He would rather, obviously, wait for these contracts to eventually expire, right? Because they're not going to pay Goldberg for the rest of his life. They're going to pay him for a year or two, whatever's left in his contract, right? Like, Time Warner is not stupid. They're not signing 10-year deals, right? Knowing that WCW is not doing very well. So what do they do? I'll tell you what they did. They waited, right, for those contracts to expire. Now Time Warner has no connection to these motherfuckers. And Vince can call Goldberg and say, hey, Goldberg, how much did Time Warner pay you? I heard it was $2 million a year. Goldberg's like, yeah, it was $2 million. Vince is like, I'll pay you $200K now to come on Raw, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Now Vince has a leverage. He has the ability to tell Goldberg, hey, here are your options. Wrestle for me and make what I tell you, which I'm sure is a fair price, or don't. And good luck in your life, motherfucker. What are you going to do? You're a star. You're going to want to leverage the fact that you're a wrestling star and you're going to want to sign with WWE, right? Unless you're Sting, who was a mega star and he had a lot more money than these motherfuckers probably. And he eventually wrestled for TNA, probably not for the money, you know what I'm saying? So there you have it, right? There you have it, cucks. That's the reason why a lot of the WCW top guys were not there, right? And it's not because, like Brian Zane in his video, he was like, Vince didn't want to pay them the money. Yeah, retard, of course he didn't want to pay them the money. Why would he pay them the money that they're getting from someone else, right? He could instead wait until they need more money and get them for, this is like market economics 101, right? The idea wasn't supposed to be this like, okay, now WCW belongs to Vince and it's Stone Cold versus Goldberg tomorrow on Raw. No, motherfuckers. The idea was supposed to be, we build up the roster, right? First of all, we have to now, like, if you're WWE, you have to vet the roster, right? Because there were a lot of young people in WCW. So you look at someone like Sean O'Hare, right? You're like, this guy looks like $1 million. This guy could be a champion one day, right? But he's like 24, right? He hasn't really done anything. So what are we going to do with him, right? We're going to keep him around and see what happens. If need be, we send him to developmental, right? But now that we have him, let's use him as part of this storyline, right? So a lot of people would say things like, well, if Goldberg was part of the alliance, it would be much, much better, right? And I'm like, no, it wouldn't. Because Goldberg is not like a heel type of guy like that. He's not supposed to be this guy who's like against WWE, right? He's Goldberg. He's like a lone wolf type guy, right? The NWO are like, they're bastards. Their entire thing, like Hogan, Nash, and Scott Hall, their entire thing is they're against WCW. So why the fuck would they help the alliance? You know what I'm saying? Like they're the NWO. They're supposed to be the competitor to WCW themselves, right? You have to think of these things before you just throw away a dream match. I wanted to see Kane and Undertaker versus Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Well, I got news for you, pal. That's not how wrestling works, right? You have to build up to these things. You have to draw every money, every penny that you can from every match, every feud, right? So what Vince opted to do was wait and then periodically sign someone like Rey Mysterio. I got Rey Mysterio's here. Boom, plug him in the Cruiserweight division, right? Oh, Scott Steiner. Boom, he's signed. Goldberg, NWO, everyone on the list that had these like big Time Warner contracts, right? Every one of those motherfuckers eventually got signed and eventually got a push of some sort, right? So the idea that all these people should have come in together would not have been good. And I'll tell you why, motherfuckers. Because if you do that, then there's literally no room in your programming for people like Edge, like Christian, like all the tag teams, like Jericho probably who wouldn't have a spot. Kane probably wouldn't have a spot. Right? There's a lot of people that would not have spots if you just brought in all these stars, right? Because nobody would give a shit. It would be like DDP, Goldberg, the NWO versus like The Rock, Stone Cold, Kane and Undertaker, and Big Show, and that'd be it, right? There's not enough room to do everything, and you needed enough room to push up-and-coming stars that WWE was already pushing, like Jericho and Kurt Angle, right? People that were made by the Invasion angle. They were elevated into the main event during that time, right? And how awesome was that? How great was that? Even having someone like Raven be the hardcore champion, right? That was very, very, very memorable, right? Or having all these tag team matches, right? From WCW tag teams and WWE tag teams. Now, in WCW, before all this bullshit happened and they were bought by WWE, right? WCW had a lot of young talent, right? They did not sign these big contracts, but they were young talent and they were presented as the future. We had scenarios where people like Billy Kidman were beating Hulk Hogan, right? So the idea that Billy Kidman was not legit is false to that logic, right? Billy Kidman was presented as a big deal for quite some time in WCW until they were bought over, and then he was relegated to a jobber once again, because let's face it, he's Billy Kidman, right? He's a jobber. So what I'm saying is this, all these young guys there, right, were guys that were up-and-comers. They were not these jobbers, right? You had people like Sean Stasiak, right, who in WCW, he was a big deal. He had like a multi-month-long undefeated streak, right? You had people like Sean O'Hare and Chuck Palumbo, who were big deals in WCW back then. A lot of people forget this. They're like, oh, Chuck Palumbo, he's not as good as Hulk Hogan. Get the fuck out of here. If it was Hulk Hogan, you'd be like, I can't believe you took Chuck Palumbo's spot. So WWE did what they could do, right, with the best resources they had, right, without spending exorbitant amounts of money to give people these dream matches, which they eventually gave them anyways, right? Now, as the Invasion angle continued, a few people stood out, right? There were people that were presented as big deals like DDP that didn't really stand out because Undertaker was clearly going to whoop his ass, right? But there were people like Rob Van Dam, for example, perfect example, that stood out. He was the hardcore champ, but he stood out because he was exciting, he was awesome. People like Rhino, who were WWE guys at the time, were getting huge pushes. They stood out, right? Rhino was wrestling like The Rock, Jericho. He was doing a lot of things, right, in WWE, and this carried on to the Alliance. He was a big-time guy for the Alliance. Then we had people like the Dudley Boys, right? The Dudley Boys were the Alliance's tag team, right? They were like the tag team of the Alliance, and they were one of the best tag teams in the world. They were booked super strong, and they were whooping that ass, right? Now that we've gone over the roster a little bit, right? Let's get to the real meat and potatoes of the Invasion angle, right? The way that it unfolded. A lot of people get upset that the Alliance had to rely on WWE stars to make itself look legit. No, they did not, motherfuckers. No, they did not. They had people like Booker T. And like, this is one thing that I cannot be forgiven. Brian saying he was like, who are we going to get? Steiner? Scott Hall? Kevin Nash? Booker T? As if Booker T is like a lesser than these guys. Booker T is a fucking legend. Booker T is awesome, right? So Booker T, right, along with people like Rob Van Dam, right, DDP, etc., were in the beginning the core of the Alliance, right? Along with Shane McMahon. Then, motherfuckers, the big turning point was Stone Cold betrayed Kurt Angle and Vince McMahon and joined the Alliance. Now, people saw this as kind of like, like a put down to WCW, right? The implications being that you need Stone Cold to seem legit. No, motherfuckers. People severely misinterpreted this. The implications were the opposite. The implications were, finally, Stone Cold has the ability to really stick it to Vince, right? The storyline is this. Stone Cold is like the hero of the Alliance. Vince McMahon is like, I need the old Stone Cold. Stone Cold comes back, beats the shit out of everybody, right? This was after he had turned heel and joined up with Vince, right? But finally, Stone Cold betrays Vince for all the things that Vince has done to him over the last decade, basically, right? And this is his first real opportunity, right? In order to just screw Vince completely, right? To take everything from him, kayfabe-wise, of course, right? Stone Cold was going to take the company from Vince. He was going to put him out of business, right? So this is consistent with Stone Cold's general character of guy who is a rebel and his mini character of guy who doesn't like his boss, right? What's the best way to stick it to your boss? Make sure that his company goes out of business and then you become the star employee of the other company that takes him out of business, right? Showing Vince that it was me all along, Vince. You shouldn't have fucked with me. I was the guy that helped you take over. I was the guy that defeated WCW, and now I'm going to defeat you, right? Stone Cold is exactly that. That's his character in the feud. His character is the guy that destroyed WCW is now going to WCW to destroy WWF. And the implications are that while people may understand his motivations of he's screwing Vince, because Vince is still a heel, right? His motivations for screwing Vince are solid, right? He is willing to piss on the fans, right? He is willing to turn on the fans in order to get his revenge, because the fans presumably don't want WCW to win, right? Vince is now left with a new band of wrestlers, right? His golden boy, Kurt Angle, Kane and Undertaker, who are aloof and detached and just want to fight, right? Jericho, who's trying to prove himself. All these people have fleshed out characters. And of course, the great one, the people's champ, The Rock, who Vince McMahon at that year's WrestleMania had completely screwed out of the title, right? So The Rock hates Vince as well, right? Now, the implications of all this, sorry about that, I got a phone call and I couldn't really miss it. But yeah, the point is that The Rock hates Vince, Stone Cold hates Vince, and Vince is finding his walls closing in on him, right? That was the idea. In there somewhere, you of course have people like Chris Kanyon, right? But that's not the focal point, right? The invasion wasn't like WWE versus WCW. The invasion was WCW versus Vince McMahon, right? This story was about, the main character of this story is Vince McMahon. But as you would see between weeks, right? Different personalities were fleshed out. Kurt Angle betrayed WWE again and joined the alliance, right? And now, The Rock became the undisputed leader of WWF. And this can be seen, right? This can be seen at the end of Survivor Series where Kurt Angle re-betrays the alliance, joins up with WWF, right? And pretty much hits Stone Cold with a title belt on the head, allowing The Rock to hit The Rock bottom on his candy ass and pin him 1, 2, 3. By pinning Stone Cold, The Rock has made it so Vince McMahon now owns WCW once again, motherfuckers. He took it from his dumbass kids. Now, here's where it gets interesting. After this, Vince McMahon comes up and raises his arms, right? And The Rock gives him this look like, what the fuck just happened? Kurt Angle betrayed them, right? Like, I was duped too. Like, The Rock was duped as well, right? And that look and that moment spoke about what this story was about. The story was about exactly that. Vince McMahon doesn't give a rat's ass about The Rock. He doesn't give a shit about Stone Cold or Kurt Angle or anybody else. Vince only cares about winning because that's the character of Vince McMahon, right? So The Rock kind of looked at him like, oh man, I did all this and like, I still have to deal with you, right? Like Vince McMahon is still there, motherfucks, right? That was the idea. So when people look at the invasion and they see dumb shit like, oh, well, Scott Hall wasn't there to wrestle Jericho, so it wasn't good. The invasion was exactly what it was supposed to be. The invasion set up two things. One, it allowed WWE to test a bunch of its future stars, like Gregory Helms, Chavo Guerrero, RVD was being tested as well. Booker T, of course, right? DDP to an extent. You know, some of the tag teams, Chuck Palumbo, he had like quite a run, I suppose. There were people that were being tested to see, can this person be someone that helps? Some people still fell through the cracks, right? People like K Quick. Remember him? He's now R-Truth. K Quick, he fell through the cracks because there just wasn't enough room for